Welcome to the MLB Network Podcast, presented by New Balance. We got now. I'm Matt Vasgersian, and our guest on this installment of the podcast spent an adult lifetime with one brand in baseball. 2020 Sporting News Executive of the Year, longtime White Sox General Manager Rick Hahn joins us. Rick, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for doing this.
Matt. Appreciate the invite.
There are so many different places to go with you, and I want to get to some of the color and some of the personalities around the White Sox teams you put together for sure. But I think I want to start here, and for the benefit of our viewers, some of whom might aspire to walk in your shoes and want to continue or pursue a career in baseball management. Your career started with a letter to Dallas Green, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. You were in the agent game for a little while, and then you latched on with the White Sox as an assistant. Yeah. Take us through that journey.
Boy, you know, I've got two sons, both in college. Actually, excuse me, one who just graduated college, who both aspire to follow the path I followed. And as I try to counsel them, you know, podiatry is a nice option too. But in all seriousness, they're afflicted with the same thing I was and am, and many other people are out there, and are just drawn to the game. And as someone whose athletic ability peaked maybe at 13, if we're being generous, this was a path, the front office was a path that I wanted to try to figure out. So, yeah, about age 10, 11, I grew up a Cub fan. People know that, despite my 23 years with the White Sox. I wrote some letters to Dallas Green, who was the GM of the Chicago Cubs back then, and he was either kind enough or foolish enough to write me back and encourage me, and we struck up a little bit of a pen pal friendship, at least from my 11-year-old perspective, where yeah. I felt at liberty to recommend certain trades, and I wanted to get Buckner out of there to make room for Leon Durham, I remember.
Oh.
I praised him on the Sandberg trade, so I was right about that at least somehow, and would send him lineups and stuff like that. But he sent me information back, and that was sort of my first taste of, all right, there's a decent chance, outside chance, that the 5'4", you know, lefty throwing, righty batting first baseman isn't going to make it to the big leagues. And this seemed like a interesting path for me to follow.
Boy, I mean, you know, and it was at a time, and you and I were visiting about this just a little while ago before we went on the air with this, there was no roadmap for the non-player at that stage of our game's history to get involved, right? You're just the guy in the office at that point that the perception was you didn't have anything to offer. How did you convince people of that back then?
Well, I tell you, it seems silly to say it now when you look around front offices and all the people with non-playing backgrounds. But the fact of the matter was that, you know, prior to going all the way back to, let's say, Paul DePodesta and Josh Burns and Mark Shapiro, there really in the mid-'90s weren't people like me with a non-playing background who might have good, strong educations factoring into front offices, into baseball departments. I went to Michigan undergrad, majored in history, which obviously is a huge benefit to anyone wanting to work in sports.
Puts you right into baseball.
There. Anytime the Yalta conference comes up in a front office meeting, I had a lot to add. And then I did what you do with a history degree, and you don't want to teach. I went to law school. Mm-hmm. So in law school is when I started writing letters. I actually reached out to Sandy Alderson because he was the one sitting GM with a law degree. And when I got a form letter back from the HR department of any of the 30 teams that I was spamming with my mail, snail mail back then, I thought that was a victory. So I resisted for years using any family connections, and because I just wanted to earn it on my own. I felt like that wasn't right, and ultimately someone convinced me, like, look, if you get in front of someone that through a favor, mm-hmm. so be it. And they're not going to hire you just as a favor. So a friend of my father's was friends with Jerry Reinsdorf, and after law school, when I wasn't quite ready to turn pro and practice law or teach law, I went to business school. So I did in 5 years what you can do in 3 or 4 now with any foresight or planning. Mm-hmm. And in reality I knew that I was going to have to probably wind up getting a real job, but I wanted to buy myself a little more time to get into sports. Jerry agreed to meet with me the winter of my first year of business school at Northwestern. And this is This is 96, shortly after the work stoppage of 94, 95, and Jerry is, sort of viewed as this sort of hawkish, aggressive owner. He denies this part of the story to this day, but when I walked into his office, he was facing the other way, and in more colorful language than I'll use right here, he explained that I was wasting his time, that I was wasting my time, that I'm more likely to be able to one day own a team than actually run a team. But he promised he'd meet with me, so let's chat. And over the course of the next 90 minutes, I think I was able to kind of sway him that, the game was probably changing a little bit in terms of who was going to make a lot of these multi-million-dollar decisions and run these expanding departments, and that perhaps people who didn't play the game would have some value. I felt that way for about 2 weeks when a letter showed up at my apartment that I was living in Evanston. My real name is Frederick. I go by Rick, but my resume says Frederick at the top. The letter says, "Dear Fred," handwritten by Jerry Reinsdorf, "Dear Fred." So he's already forgotten my name. I've thought long and hard about your career aspirations, and I counsel you to lie down and come to your senses. And then goes on a little bit, and then it says, "However, if you want to learn about scouting while holding down a real job, feel free to contact me, and I'll put you in touch with our amateur scouts." So my summer after first year of business school at Kellogg, while my buddies are working in finance and consulting and all that, poor Nathan Durst, who's still a scout with the White Sox, was in charge of chaperoning me around to amateur games. And I think the scouts got a kick out of it. Here's this Harvard law grad and business student saying they're holding the gun, trying to break down players with them. And it was a very educational opportunity, and it obviously allowed me some connections within the White Sox. And over the course of the next few years, between 96, when that was summer of 97, and ultimately when they hired me in 2000, I was able to sort of keep up those connections.
It's amazing. From 2000 as an assistant to the GM role in 2012, you occupied that for the better part of a decade. That's a lot of skin in the game with one brand, which is exceptional in pro sports these days, and it gets back to the figure that you just mentioned. Jerry Reinsdorf is a very loyal guy. You're one of Jerry's guys. He's going to keep you whole. He's going to keep you in the family for a long time. What kind of a challenge does that present with a GM? You have this bigger-than-life figure who is essentially your boss, and he's very loyal to people. You might want to make some changes. Talk about that challenge.
I mean, I knew, let me preface it by saying that I was extremely blessed to be able to work for one pro sports team for 23 years. It happened to be one in my hometown, which made it even more special. It's part of the reason I have, mild tongue-in-cheek resistance to my children going into this, because what they experienced, them being born while I worked for the White Sox and graduating high school, I worked for the White Sox without any real disruption to their life, having to move, having significant change in lifestyle. That's a gift, and that doesn't happen in pro sports. And it was important to me along the way. One, because I didn't want to disrupt their lives. Two, because this was my hometown, and it meant a little more to me to win there, as silly as that may sound.
It doesn't sound silly at all.
And I knew that it wasn't perfect for whatever reason. Quite candidly, very few of the 30 opportunities for a general manager are going to be perfect. And the ones that open tend to open for a reason. There's something inherently not working there. Although there were at times that opportunity to move on, and perhaps the grass looked a little bit greener, and perhaps the internal dynamics that were set up by someone who is immensely loyal, who has been doing it for a long time and therefore has pretty strong beliefs about what a winning organization looks like, perhaps that made my job at times a little more difficult. But the benefit of potentially winning in Chicago and being part of, a franchise that was historic and meaningful to its fans, that overrode it all for me. In fact, any time, for lack of a better description, I didn't get my way, I wasn't able to execute something I wanted to execute for whatever reason, I put that on me. I put that on my inability to essentially advocate well enough for what I thought was right. And there were plenty of times where, Jerry and I went no-to-nose on certain things. Ultimately the golden rule prevails, with the gold rules. So it was his decision in the end. This is ultimately the owner's thing, and he lets us play with it. Yeah. So there's challenges everywhere. I was more than happy to deal with the challenges that we encountered in Chicago because of the tremendous upside to me personally being there.
Well, there are challenges in any GM seat, and after a quick break, we're going to visit with Rick about the multifaceted role of being a Major League general manager, part conductor, part architect, part shepherd, and dare I say, occasional babysitter. We'll talk to Rick about those elements of being a big league GM next on the MLB Network Podcast.
Worn by players like Tristan Casas and Jeremy Pena to meet the demand of elite ball players, the New Balance Fresh Foam 3000 V7 is the comfortable cleat to help you stay focused on your gameplay. The 3000 V7 is designed to deliver comfort and unrelenting confidence on the field with an innovative coated mesh that offers soft breathability and durability. The Fresh Foam cushioning is precision engineered to deliver an ultra-cushioned, lightweight ride while a gusseted tongue keeps you centered. Learn more and purchase the 3000 at newbalance.com.
Continuing with longtime White Sox general manager Rick Hahn, I have in my hot little hand here, Rick, just a partial list of some of the colorful characters that you had the pleasure of working alongside as players during your White Sox time. Orlando Hudson. You had Adam Dunn and Jake Peavy when they were shooting arrows at people's ducks in spring training. You had Tim Anderson when he had a film crew following him around for his own documentary. Yep. You had Adam LaRoche when his son Drake was lockering next to him. You had Alex Colomé. You had Lance Lynn. You had Chris Sale when he was cutting up his uniform. You had Ozzie for 7.5 years before you became the GM, but as the assistant GM, I'm sure there was some color there with Ozzie. The idea then of a general manager, a baseball executive, playing babysitter on occasion, it had to have been a major part of your existence during your time on the South Side.
I'd put it more as fundamentally part of the job is putting these guys in the best position to succeed and giving them the resources, whether it's advanced scouting, whether it's cold tubs, whether it's the proper spread, whether it's concerns about wife and family travel and accommodations. You want to do as much as you possibly can to get them healthy and focused for 3 hours a night.
But while you're doing all that stuff, you got Ozzie flipping the spread that you so meticulously put out there. You got other guys doing the other things. It has to get in the way occasionally.
Well, and that's sort of where I was going, is that, you can't, every day it's going to be something different usually that gets in the way of getting into that spot. And it's really a job of, there's an element of whack-a-mole to it, and there's an element of putting out fires and just trying to get everyone steered back towards the focus. And look, one of the great things Ozzie did, Sox fans will certainly remember down the stretch in 2005. I think we went from like a 14.5 game lead in August-ish. Cleveland went lose for like 6 weeks, and that lead went down to like a game and a half. And there's stories being written about Philadelphia and historically where this blown opportunity would rank. Things got a little tight. Ozzie, once things started getting a little bit tighter, announced that if the White Sox win the World Series this year, he's going to retire. Now, obviously, we won the World Series. He didn't retire. I don't think there was ever any intention of Ozzie retiring. But he had this knack back then of almost setting himself on fire so that the media would rush to him, and Paul Konerko isn't getting questions about, can you believe you're giving up this lead? And Ozzie was the story then at the right time, and he had that gift for, again, alleviating the pressure from the player so they could go out and succeed. And there was a handful of things along the line there that you didn't prepare for,
Sure. But that's a fascinating layer of information, and I think, in today's culture of the game, we lament the lack of those colorful figures, but we've actually, as the media, kind of killed them all off, because we want somebody to speak their mind and be their own person and be colorful and genuine, yet when they are, we somehow take issue with that and we kill them on social media. So how are these guys ever going to flourish again?
That you just nailed it with social media, in my opinion. And I know this makes me sound like an old man, get off my lawn, and like it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. But player behavior and player color, as you put it, got truncated with camera phones and social media.
Oh, dudes don't even go out anymore.
Precisely. I mean, we had Eddie Casson, who was a longtime White Sox traveling secretary, still is wonderful at his job. Every player who's come through there has positive things to say about Eddie. Years ago, I was in some hotel bar with just Eddie and maybe the manager at the time. I think it was Robin. And I was like, Eddie, no one ever comes to the bar anymore. No players come down to talk. I mean, there was a lot, even in the early part of my tenure, part of my career, 2001 through 2010, like you get valuable information from players. You could talk with the guard down in the hotel bar. And Eddie said, Rick, he goes, all those big cases they travel with video games. They go up to their room and they actually play the guy in the next room and the video game. They don't even come together to do it. Yep. And again, it's the social media and the dramatic impact it can have on a player's career by, being, I don't know, called out for having too much color.
There's too much on the line.
Too much on the line.
I get it. I get what the players are doing. Hey, I want to ask you about something that's really fascinating to me. A big part of your job, of course, contract negotiations.
Yes.
And we don't even have to use the White Sox in this. You are the general manager of Team X, and Team X has a player who's been crucial to their success. He's on the wrong side of 30. His contract is expiring at the end of the month. He and his camp are asking for a huge amount of dough. You're a 500-ish team. Is it ever okay for you as that general manager, if you have the relationship with the player, to say, hey, dude, can you come into my office before the game so you and I can just talk? Can you do that anymore?
The short answer is yes. Never from the standpoint of I'm calling the player to have that conversation without the knowledge of the agent. Wouldn't do that. But there were players time and time again who re-signed with the White Sox because of the relationships they had with us. Konerko's a great example. Burley, 2007, I want to say, there's all this rumor he's getting traded at the deadline. Mark was the one instigating, here's what it's going to take for me to stay, this is why, this is what I want, and we were able to work it out.
And he did that directly with you?
He did it, his agent was obviously heavily involved, but the messages were received. Jake Peavy, who I just saw earlier today, he brought up the fact that when he hit free agency after 2012, he did the rare thing of signing during the quiet period. Never made it all the way to free agency because he said, I want X times Y, and we were able to meet it. I think those relationships are essential. And again, if the player isn't comfortable, you're talking about Burley, you're talking about Konerko, you're talking about Peavy. Veteran guys, comfortable in their own skin, have made a little bit of cash along the way, and they sort of know what they feel their value is at that point. Being accessible to that player to have that conversation, I think, is essential. Again, not to carve anybody out, not to screw anybody out of, leaving money on the table, but you want to, fundamentally, it's an employer-employee relationship, and you want to, whether it's the Chicago White Sox, the MLB Network, or, Joe's Garden, you want to be able to have open dialogue with those who dictate your salary.
Right.
So I think that's important from a cultural standpoint.
I always think about the cross-sport analogy here. The goalie from Slapshot, Denis Lemieux, trade me right now, right? Doing that kind of thing with the boss. We don't have those conversations anymore. We're going to continue with Rick Hahn and do some word association. And the first thing that pops into his mind when I say things like, what do you want to do over on? Or what's the funniest thing Hawk Harrelson ever told you? Much more with Rick. We continue right after this.
The Farmer's Dog thinks about your dog every day because their goal is to help them live a long, healthy life. Their food is developed by a team of board-certified vet nutritionists. Unlike most pet foods, the Farmer's Dog is made to human-grade standards. It's gently cooked without the ultra-processing and portioned for easy weight management. Because sure, good ingredients matter, but the best recipes call for so much more. Get 50% off your first box of the official pet food of Major League Baseball at thefarmersdog.com/MLB. That's thefarmersdog.com/MLB.
Welcome back to the MLB Network Podcast. Just a few minutes left with Rick Hahn. Some quick hitters here, Rick. If you could be in the stands for one moment in baseball history, what would it be?
You know, I was at Kerry Wood's 20 strikeout game.
Oh, really?
I know every Cub fan from 1996 says that, but I actually was there in the bleachers in the rain.
Were you the guy that was holding up the sign that said, "We got wood"?
I was not, but those were very popular T-shirts back then.
Oh, my God, I love that.
Somehow I avoided buying one of those.
In my apartment in Milwaukee watching that game because it was a day game at Wrigley.
It should have been a no-hitter.
That's right.
That was an error.
That's a good one. Here's the next one. You're a Chicago guy, Harry Carey or Hawk Harrelson?
I mean, shoot, that's a tough one. I got to say Hawk because of my working relationship with him for over 2
Hawk all
decades.
day
I got to go
too.
Hawk. I got to go Hawk.
Give me one Hawk story that maybe would rank among those we haven't heard, because we've heard so many good ones.
I mean, Hawk obviously had a magnificent career, both as a broadcaster, as a player, less so as a front office executive. But that summer of '68, you know, he was one of the best hitters in baseball.
That's right.
So there was always the rest of his career didn't look a lot like '68, but that '68 he got a lot of mileage out of. And I remember one time we were actually I was not there. This story came from Tommy and Canerico. We were in a little bit of a slump at one point, and Hawkaroo took it upon himself on a flight home from somewhere to wander back to the player's side of the plane and pull Tommy and Canerico together to give them some tips how to come out of their slump. And the true Hawk essence of it is he turned to them and said, "Boys, hitters like us, here's what we got to do."
Love it.
It's like, okay, I'm not sure that's a triumvirate a lot of people see, but
he could get away with it.
He could get away with it,
Sure.
and he had their attention and respect.
I love the guy. Here's the last one of these quick hitters, and I have a feeling I know where you're going to go here. If there's a trade you wish you could have a do-over on.
I mean, it begins and ends with Tatis. I mean, what fool would trade him? Here's the thing about Tatis. Obviously, horrible trade. Judged at the time when we made the deal, I like to point to the success of our international scouting department.
Okay.
Tatis was a $600,000, maybe $800,000 sign, not top-tier bonus guy.
17-year-old kid had not played a professional inning yet.
Had not played. He was in extended with us, but we traded him several months after, less than a year after we had signed him. And there were a few people in player development who viewed him as a lottery ticket, so to speak, having tremendous upside, and this guy could come back and bite you if you made the trade. I had that knowledge. Unfortunately, you know, San Diego actually asked for Eric Johnson, who was part of the trade, right-handed pitcher, as well as another arm initially, and we were reluctant to include 2 arms. The second arm never went on to actually appear.
They didn't even ask for Tatis?
Initially, it was a different arm. It was a different arm, and we pushed back, and we wound up shuffling and pivoting. In the end, they asked for Tatis, which they deserve a ton of credit for identifying this guy out of complex ball as someone they wanted. At the time, it was 2016. We were dealing with a team that was 23-10 coming out of the gate. We knew we weren't as good as 23-10. Matt Latos was doing some things with smoke and mirrors early on in that season. John Danks was trying to fight his way back from injury and losing that battle. And we had a manager in Robin who kind of knew that, like, this, if we don't win this year, he might not want to be around too much longer on his own volition. So there was a lot pointing towards, let's push in to make this work.
Win now.
And win now. And obviously I regret the trade. Obviously it did not work out the way we hoped, because we wound up not winning, and we ultimately, that was probably the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of finally getting us to rebuild. But I understand, and I think I take lessons with me going forward. But frankly, as part of the rebuild was wanting to have the depth to withstand if you didn't have, if you had failure at one spot on that roster, which we just did not have in sort of this sort of piecemeal patch on the fly technique we were using.
I don't want to kick you anymore on that one.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
we have
PTSD right now.
One last question here. It's time for the We Got Now question presented by New Balance.
Okay.
The player that you either drafted or worked with in the past that you find yourself, for whatever reason, keeping close tabs on right now.
Oh, boy. I mean, I take great pride in the fact that in 21, when we won the division, we had a decent amount of injuries, like most teams do. But on that 21 division winner, we had 9 different first-round picks of ours contribute in some way. Some were just for a game or two. Some were Carlos Rodon and Tim Anderson. I took a great deal of pride in that. So whether it's Jake Berger or whether it's Carlos, who I mentioned, or Garrett Crochet, take a great deal of pride in those relationships and root for those guys to have success as they go on with their career. I'd say the one guy that obviously currently take a little bit of pride in, and again, it's organizational pride, not Rick Hahn pride, is what Crochet's turned into. Because here's a guy who barely pitched at Tennessee. You're dealing with COVID. He had arm issues. And to his credit, our scouting director at the time, Mike Shirley, said, Rick, I know you think I'm crazy, but I'm pounding the table for this guy, and here's why. And he was relentless about it, and we discussed the upside. And he had injury issues as a pro, and it didn't quite. Initially, it was bullpen versus starter, and is it going to work? And now to see Garrett, who's a wonderful kid, see all his hard work pay off, and him flourish in the way that our scouts and player development people foresaw, that's one I take with me right now.
I lied to you. One last question.
That's fine.
Give us one little tiny innocuous White Sox secret that we might not have ever known.
When Alexei Ramirez first signed with us and first made his big league appearance opening day in Cleveland, his pregame meal, which he availed himself of in the visiting clubhouse, was 2 Krispy Kreme donuts with a layer of mayonnaise in between that he smushed together. Now, and at the time there was, he was skinny as a beanpole. He was skinny as could be, and he could get away with it. And there was actually stunned silence about what the hell is this guy doing, and is that tasty? But it also highlighted, just how far a player like Alexei and later Abreu, and obviously we had Contreras and Orlando Hernandez along the way, how far of a culture change it was for them. This guy didn't have nutritional training. This guy didn't know what he needed to help optimize his peak performance, reach his peak performance, and it highlighted, hey, this is an area of need that we need to get on. But that was something to behold.
Wow. Double Krispy Kreme and mayo. Stat. And then get me to a couple of cardiac paddles. Rick, it's been great having you on. Thanks for the time. Thanks for watching this installment of the MLB Network Podcast presented by New Balance.